Bonjour, mes amis. It's Roger from Mudfossil University with complete and total support of everything I've been saying about mud fossils. And it started long ago with Velikovsky's understanding of what was written about the ancient texts. Now we have people, scholarly people, that are standing up. Velikovsky was destroyed. Worlds and Collisions, a book by Immanuel Velikovsky. You've probably never heard of him because he was destroyed. It was in 1950. The book postulates around the 15th century BC, the planet Venus was ejected from Jupiter as a comet or comet-like object. It passed near Earth, and they talk about almost a collision, but not a collision. The object allegedly changed Earth's orbit and axis, causing innumerable catastrophes that are mentioned in early mythologies and religions from around the world, like the Great Flood, like this, like all kinds of things. The book has been heavily criticized, a work of pseudoscience and catastrophicism. Many of its claims are completely rejected by established scientific community as they are not supported by any available evidence. Wrong, 100% wrong, and it's always been wrong, and they destroyed him as an act of vengeance against him standing up for reality. So I wrote a book about him. And this was a while back. Mud fossils, Velikovsky, mines in collision. That's the problem. I have all the evidence that supports him. And I guess I published it in 2016, February 20. It's 99 cents. I had to put some price on it. I think I would have wanted to do it for free, but I think you have to do something. But anyway, all I care about is showing the evidence. And I'm going to show you some evidence right now that supports everything that he said. And now we're going to dive deep. Now this is deep, so if you don't want to get deep, you just go on with your life. But if you really want to try to understand and put the pieces together and dot the dots and draw the lines, stick with me because we're going to get deep. This is a guy right here. Whoops. Well, here you go right here. In that day, he will, with his great and mighty sword, he will bring judgment on Leviathan, the serpent living in the coil. He will slay the dragon of the sea. And I have shown that dragon of the sea many, many, many times. And it is gigantic, and all of these Bible texts refer to it. You have Google Earth. Go up on Google Earth, just like I'm doing right now, and say, ooh, let me see North Africa. And all you do is go zip, just like that, and then you go zip, just like this, and you go zip like that, and then you go zip just like this, and then you say, ooh, what is that? You say, gee, that looks like a giant fish. It's a gigantic fish. Looks like it to me. And something is attacking its fin and eating into its vital flesh and destroying its vital flesh. And what does that do? Does it doing that? A dragon. It's a dragon. These are dead animals now, and they're rotting away. That is the effluent of bodily fluids. Any anatomist, any forensic person absolutely understands this is what happens when blood and fluids just are dismissed from a dead creature. They just leak out and they run all over like that. Now, this is the throat. This is the stuff that was spit onto that dragon, on that fish. And it is not something you see laying around every day. Now, it came out of the dragon's throat. So we're giving a little support to Velikovsky for the things that were written in the past that he put credence to rather than just laughing and destroying. They took his books off the top shelf of the New York Times bestseller list. For 10 weeks in a row, they forced the publisher to take it off the bookshelves, or they said academia would never buy any more books from them. And he was destroyed. His whole life was destroyed from these people. And he was a contemporary of Einstein. He knew Einstein. This guy was no fool. He was a PhD. He was all that stuff. He was a scholar. And now this is a dragon's throat. You see it run, 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 run. I showed you that thing about the dragon being slashed his throat with a great and mighty sword. That's it right there. It's bleeding out in the desert. That's red and black blood. That is vein and artery blood. And that sucker was chopped. And that thing runs, I think it's almost 1,300 miles. It goes from here all the way down. This is its body. These are the legs. Now, I'm not going to spend forever up here because I've done it 100 times minimum. There's the tail. These are all dragon scales. This is all running off dead, decaying, decomposing body. And it flares all the way out to the end. They have a fluty flare at the end of their tail, and it's way over here. That is entire North Africa. And at the same time that happened, all of the ocean that was here drained out over the top of Atlantis, which was here. And they talked about a straits, which is here. And the straits gave way, which is here. And it flowed and dragged billions and trillions and bazillions of tons of mud out into the ocean, creating, I believe these are Cape Verde Islands. And Plato says exactly this. And if you go down and look at Atlantis, you'll actually find what I believe are boat docks, and there may actually even be some remnants of shipping or whatever was here. Each one of these looks like a little canal to me. And then as you get real close up, you see that they have each little channel coming in. That's kind of unusual to see that, just laying around like that. One right after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other. And you can just go after the other until infinity. Now, Plato talks about this happening 900 years prior to him. In that area. I figured it out to be 1250 BC is when Plato claims this occurred. And I say this is what he's talking about. I mean, it's exactly what he's talking about. Now, all of this happened at the same time. The fish, the dragon, the collapse. I can see mud running over the fish. Coming from, and I think that's the wings. So I think that's part of the wings of the dragon. You see this stuff? I don't know if it's wings or it's just mud, but it was a red-winged dragon, and it could very well have been the wings. I have a lot to talk about. It's spectacular. I can't account for it. No, absolutely not. But I can tell you what, this apparently was somehow elevated here enough to hold the waters inside this region. And as this guy we're going to be talking about in a minute, he's a PhD, and he studies this, and he studies the cultures. He's never going to talk about this here, right here. He's only going to talk about stuff that happened up in this area, which was outside and held the bowl of water here. And Atlantis was the entrance to it. And on the old maps, I think I have a map here. Hold on. Okay, here's the map I was referring to now, and it gets really detailed. But remember, Atlantis was over here, all right, coming in off of the ocean. There's the really fancy looking Atlantis balls. And then here's the dragon. There's the head of the dragon. There's his throat chopped right there. These are the dragon scales. And it runs the entire length of North Africa, all the way across the top of North Africa until you hit the Red Sea. They knew so much about our world that we don't even have a clue about. Now, the other one that I want you to pay attention to is the dragon here, right in the center of Europe, because I have some information about that. It's a startling information, by the way. So, things are not what we were told. They dismissed all this, laughed at it, destroyed Velikovsky, and I don't know if it was an organized gang that does this, because it's being done to me too. So, and it is organized, and it is very, very repressive. And if I was trying to make a living, which I don't have to, thank God, I wouldn't be able to. I lost everybody that was involved in my life, basically, to be honest with you, once I started this, because it's just too much for most people to even discuss, and then they don't want to be nasty to you, I suppose. So it ends up, you just go on your own. And that's what happened to me. So, and there's so much to this. It's just, I mean, I think it's fascinating as hell. But a lot of people just have a hard time. Now, at one time, I think this was Musa Musafa or something like that. I think he was the king, basically, of the world. And then all these other guys were like leaders of their own lands, that type of thing. I don't know. There's so much research to be done here. Why is it not being done? That's my issue. By the way, I believe this map is from 1375. I have some, I don't know why I have this down, Atlas, Catalan, Abraham, Kresk, whatever that means. But it's a very, very detailed map, and it's very accurate. And even Iceland up here, which is it's nothing but dragonish stuff, you're completely covered with dragons. That's what those are dragon scales. Dragon scales, dragon scales. There was a lot of dragons, trust me. So, that's what it is. These are all the different beasts in Icelandia. Now, this is another ancient map. I don't know what year it goes back to, but it's long ago. And it depicts all the different types of creatures. Now, the only thing I can take is that they were screwing around with DNA, because you got bull-headed people and bull-headed, bull-bodied people with heads, and I mean, you got wolf-headed people, and you got all these crazy-looking things, and and apparently they were really real, and they were hunted to basically extinction or hiding or whatever it is, or I don't know. I just don't know anymore. Because now they're reporting a lot of things that nobody's ever talked about because they're scared to speak of them. Even, I got to be honest with you, when I started to uncover this stuff, my voice was shaking a little bit when I talked to people. Say, the guy's going to think I'm absolutely insane. And they did. And they treated you like that. And if you can't accept it and you can't absorb it, you better not start talking. Because that's what's going to happen. And unless you stand up for yourself long enough and endure enough of it, you turn pretty sour pretty quick. And that happened to me. And it's probably going to happen to you. It's not the big gift everybody thinks, oh, look at this, this is fabulous, thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, talk to me in about 6 months. That's all you could do is laugh about it, because now we know the evidence, we know the truth. The people that can't open their eyes, can't accept reality, those are the most educated people, because they're too educated to be able to even let their mind roam into this realm, which was written about, which has evidence to support, which has the ancient texts, ancient maps. I have this DNA-supported, CAT-scanned, giant human remains, all documented in the ancient texts. And now we're going to go into George Washington University. This fellow, he's a PhD, and I saw his video, started to explain what happened and how the movement of all the peoples left that region, which was the Libyan Ocean, basically. And it drained out through Atlantis. And let's start into his stuff. He's absolutely fabulous. I tried to contact him, and I hope we can get together and discuss this, maybe have a Zoom meeting or something where people can Zoom in and ask questions. That's all I really ever wanted. I'm not forcing my opinions or research on anybody. But if it's not allowed to be seen, then I'm going to force. Okay, this is Dr. Eric Klein, and he is an archaeologist, anthropologist, explorer now, and he's got a lot of credentials. And his book about 1177 BC, the year civilization collapsed, is considered for a Pulitzer Prize. And he's classics in anthropology and the current director of Capital Archaeological Institute, George Washington University, National Explorer, Geographical Explorer, Fulbright Scholar, NEH Public Scholar, an award-winning teacher and author. He has degrees in archaeology, ancient history from Dartmouth, Yale, and the University of Pennsylvania. 2015, he was awarded an honorary doctoral degree from Muhlenberg College. Dr. Klein is an active field archaeologist, 30 seasons of excavation and survey experience. Now, I also have a lot of experience in what I present as well. So I'm not just coming out blind and just throwing something at everybody. Now, most people understand I did the mud fossils. I discovered mud fossils and how the preservation process works. And I've had them all DNA tested, CAT scan. I probably already showed you all that stuff. Anyway, let's go into this. Now, this is his presentation, October 2016. I wrote my book over here, was February 2016, about very similar things. Now, let's see what he had to say in this speech. And it's quite a long speech, an hour and 10 minutes. So, or is that 110 minutes? I'm not sure. Anyway, let's see what he has to say, and I'll comment here and there. Here goes. By the way, I just want to make one point. I work under the Fair Use Act, which means I can use anybody's copyright material for research and teaching, and that's all I'm doing. So it's not like I'm stealing it. I'm just going to respond to what his interpretations of his evidence are. Now, that's what I would love to have others respond to my evidence, because I have copious amounts of evidence that just is dismissed because there is no way to respond to it in a way that is meaningful if you're going to dismiss it. Because you can't dismiss it. What I present is, I've already shown you, I hope, the dragon and the fish, and I have every single bit of evidence to support what I say. So to just walk away and say, oh, the guy's crazy, it's just too much. And that's exactly what it's been for 10 years. So I'm done with it. Anyway, here we go.
Well, welcome. My topic today, I'm going to talk about 1177 BC. So let me take you away from rainy Bethesda and take you back more than 3,000 years in the past, where hopefully it's a little warmer and sunnier. This is the Late Bronze Age. This is the period that is, I would say, nearest and dearest to my heart. If I could be reincarnated backwards, I would choose to live back then. I'm sure I would not live more than about 48 hours. But it'd be a good 48 hours. So we're in the period from 1700 to about 1200 BC here, 500 years. And you can see from this map, the different colored areas are the different civilizations that were around at that point. Basically, I call them for shorthand the G8 of the ancient world, because there's actually 9, but never mind. So it's close. So we've got Minoans and Mycenaeans over in Greece. We've got Hittites up in Turkey. We've got the Egyptians, which are coming up here into Canaan. Mitanni here, Assyrians and Babylonians. Cypriots here. These are the great powers of the Late Bronze Age. They're all flourishing 3,500 years ago, give or take. And this is actually a period that you know about. You might not have thought you knew about it, but you do. Because in this time period, we've got...
Before we go any further, let's remember what he had to say. These surrounding areas, let's look at it again. He's talking about cultures that exist up in these areas, Arabia. This is the Red Sea. Over this way is what my interpretation is the Libyan Sea that drained out across Atlantis about 1,250 years ago, 1150 BC to 1250 BC. That's about where I came in. Now, if this was all ocean over there, nobody's living there, obviously. So, except for Atlantis, which is way off the other side. So this was like a bowl, and Egypt was on the side of it. So let's go back again and listen to what he has to say. These are the different cultures that lived over in these areas. And that was 1500 BC. Now, 1500 BC, after that, something happened, apparently. Let's see.
Call them for shorthand the G8 of the ancient world, because there's actually 9, but never mind. So it's close. So we've got Minoans and Mycenaeans over in Greece. We've got Hittites up in Turkey. We've got the Egyptians, which are coming up here into Canaan. Mitanni here, Assyrians and Babylonians. Cypriots here. These are the great powers of the Late Bronze Age. They're all flourishing 3,500 years ago, give or take. And this is actually a period that you know about. You might not have thought you knew about it, but you do. Because in this time period, we've got Hatshepsut, the world's first female pharaoh. Familiar to anybody? You've all heard of her, right? Tutmosis III, her stepson, Amenhotep III. How about Akhenaten, the heretic pharaoh? Right? Okay, so he's in this period as well. I'm venturing to guess that most of you have heard of King Tut. Would I be correct about that? Yes, okay, so that's this period as well. Ramses II, pharaoh of the Exodus, if it took place. That's another lecture. Ramses III is going to be our boy today. He's going to be the hero of this particular period. This is also the time when we get the Battle of Kadesh between the Egyptians and the Hittites, 1279. Little thing called the Trojan War. Heard of that? That's at this time period. In fact, this is the context for the Trojan War. I do think it happened. Again, that's a topic for another lecture. My wife does not think it happened. We argue about this at home. Others argue over mortgage payments. We argue about the Trojan War. So, and then again, this is the period of the Exodus, probably about 1250 BC, if it took place. So you see, you already know this period, even if you thought that you did not. Now, one thing that is special about this period is that it is globalized for its time period. That is, it's not globalized like we are today, but from Italy on the west to Iraq and India on the east, they are all in connection with each other. They're all in contact. From Turkey in the north down to Egypt in the south.
I showed you that ancient map, I believe by now I've shown it, and it draws all these different interactions between different peoples. So they were able to either get along or they ended up having wars. Now, I think it seems that the whole history of humanity has been nothing but one giant war, but anyway.
We get one of these social network diagrams. That's what my wife does, social network analysis. So this is courtesy of her. You know the, what is it, 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon with all the movies? Yeah, same thing here, except that this is what's called a small world, which means there are no more than 3 leaps between any 2 pairs, or any pair of people. So if the Mycenaeans did not know the Assyrians, they knew the Hittites who knew the Assyrians, and you could get there within 1 or 2 leaps. Now, the reason this is important is that there's been very few times in history where we've had such a situation. Us today is one, them back then is another. So this is why I would say that looking at what happened to these guys, even though it was more than 3,200 years ago, is actually relevant to today, because looking at what happened to them might have implications for us today as well. And what happened? Well,
let me just make a couple of statements at this point in time. It is 100% relevant because it is all talked about, and it's something that's been dismissed. Now, don't forget, we're talking about down here is an ocean. He's only talking about the movement of peoples up here. Now, he's an archaeologist, an anthropologist. I'm sure he's thought about all these things down here. Why isn't there populations down there? And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is populations down there, but I don't see him talking about it. So let's continue on. He's talking about when this happened. I believe this was when the great global flood occurred. Noah, the whole 9 yards.
they collapsed. Just after 1200 BC, everything that had been going very nicely for several centuries by this point,
Let's go back to
more
here.
than 3,200 years ago, is actually relevant to today, because looking at what happened to them might have implications for us today as well. And what happened? Well, they collapsed. Just after 1200 BC, everything that had been going very nicely for several centuries by this point comes to a crashing halt on either side of 1200 BC. Right? Everybody that I just mentioned goes down. We get a dark age that lasts for between 150 and 300 years.
I claim that was the post-flood era. So up until this particular time, they were screwing around with all kind of DNA and monsters and crazy things. You see them on the walls. I'm not making this up. It's everywhere. And then we had the Great Flood. Now, what caused the Great Flood? I'm not 100% certain, but I know that the fish and the dragon over here caused something to happen. Now, whether that was part of, I don't know. But I'm going to tell you what, this is where I feel the Great Flood came in. And I also have some more information, but I wanted him to explain his point of view first, and then I'll respond.
And basically, civilization has to reboot in this area. Okay? So, this was a huge loss to the world. It is comparable to the collapse of the Roman Empire, which happened 1,500 years later. The main problem is we're not really sure what caused it. So that's what I want to talk about mostly today, are the possible explanations for what caused that collapse. and then see if maybe we should start going, yeah, all right. So,
I think we should start going, yeah, because I believe I can support the ancient statements that claim what happened, as I showed you. We know that it evacuated out across of Atlantis.
it used to be that it was a very simple explanation. When I was in graduate school, when I was an undergraduate, and for decades before me, the simple solution was that the sea peoples had done it. When in doubt, the sea peoples. So, who are the sea peoples? Well, this is the Egyptian name for them. The Egyptians, actually, it's our name for them. We call them the sea peoples. The Egyptians talk about a number of different groups coming through the eastern Mediterranean and winding up in Egypt on the shores, attacking them, not once but twice over a 30-year period.
Now, these were apparently the survivors of Atlantis and the western region coming to Ethiopia and so forth out of the mud, literally, to try to establish themselves.
They come in 1207 and they come in 1177. And yes, 1177 is where I get the title of the book. It is the second time that Egypt is invaded by these people. Now, the problem is, in fact, that the dates change. The Egyptologists keep changing the chronology. So a better way to put it is the 5th year of Merneptah and the 8th year of Ramses III, and that way you don't have to worry about it. Right? On their inscriptions, they say, in my 5th year this happened, and in the 8th year this happened. That is why when the book came out 2 years ago, I got a nice note from a senior colleague in New York City. And he sent me an email, and all he said is, congrats on the book. The title should have been 1186 BC. I wrote him back a 2-word email. No, it's not what you're thinking. I wrote back and said it was. And in fact, the original contract, which I had signed with Princeton back in 2007, the title was 1186 BC. But in the interim, while I was working on it, the Egyptologists changed the chronology again. So it became 1177. Ironically, since it's come out, they've changed the chronology back. So the next edition is probably going to be called 1186, question mark, something like that. Anyway, all right, so what we get, the Egyptians tell us in both reigns, in Merneptah and Ramses III, but let me focus on Ramses III here because it's more literally picturesque. He leaves on the wall of his mortuary temple in Egypt, a place called Medinet Habu, which is near the Valley of the Kings. In fact, I presume some of you have been there. Anybody been to Medinet Habu? No? Well, I think we need a field trip, for sure. Definitely. All right, well, it's over by King Tut's tomb, the Valley of the Kings. On a wall of his temple, which is what you're looking at here on the left-hand side, and you see the drawing on the right-hand side, he gives us a picture of the invasion and an inscription of what went on. So he tells us the foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once the lands were removed and scattered in their fray. No land could stand before their arms. And then he tells us what happens, who they overran.
Remember, look at this. The foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. That's what Atlantis was. It was not only Atlantis, it was a series of islands. All at once, the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. Now, it says no land could stand before their arms. I don't think that's part of the same statement. This says all at once, the lands were removed. So they're gone. Their foreign countries were gone. And they were scattered in the fray. They just tried to find a place to go. No land could stand before their arms. They were the toughest of the tough. Anyway, all of these different places being cut off at one time. A camp was set up in one place in Amur. They desolated its peoples. This is absolutely amazing.
Hate, Kode, Carchemish, Artsua, and Alashia on. Now we know where these places are. Hatti is Turkey, it's the Hittites. Kode is where Turkey meets Syria. Carchemish, northern Syria. Artsua is actually western Turkey on the coast there. Alashia is the ancient name for Cyprus. So these people are sweeping across from west to east, across Turkey, down the Levant, across Cyprus. They set up a camp in Amur, that's northern Syria, desolated its people. Its land was like that which has never come into being. They were coming forward toward Egypt. Flame was prepared before them. And then he actually tells us the name of the peoples. He says their confederation was the Peleset, the Tejeker, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, and the Weshesh. So it gives us, how many is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there. There's another 6 that are mentioned the first time back in 1207. 2 of them overlap, so there's a total of 9 separate groups that come twice in those 30 years. So, where are they from? What are they doing? What happens to them? Well, we're told part of that. Ramses, in another inscription from a couple years later, he says, I overthrew those who invaded from their lands. I slew the Denyen, who were in their isles. The Tejeker and the Peleset were made ashes. The Shardana and the Weshesh of the sea, they were made as those that exist not. So he beats them. And in fact, Merneptah had beaten them back in 1207 as well. So they come twice, they lose twice, they do not come a third time. That's it. All right? Now, the question is, where do they come from? And what do they look like? Well, what do they look like is easy because Ramses shows us the pictures. This is a picture of the Sea Peoples. In fact, if anybody is going to dress up for Halloween, there you go. Right, though it's actually, I've got a cheaper way to do it. When I was in grad school, the 2 people the year behind me, they came to our Halloween party with about 100 papier-mâché C's stapled to their clothes. We said, what are you? They said, well, we're Sea Peoples. So they won first place. So, true story. All right, so that's what they look like. The problem is, though, where do they come from? So, for instance,
This is where I come in. I think they were from Atlantis.
one of the groups is Shardana, the other is Shekelesh, Tejeker, Denyen, the names I just read to you. Can you think of any place in the Mediterranean, either eastern or western, that looks like Shardana? Sardinia, absolutely. So people think that maybe they're from Sardinia. Or maybe they went there afterward, one way or the other. How about Shekelesh? Any place in the Mediterranean got the same consonants? Forget about the vowels, but the same consonants? No, not Ascalon, though that is an interesting idea, but no. Somewhere near Sardinia? Sicily, absolutely, right. So Sicily. Tejeker is a little bit harder. We're thinking maybe the Troad or Sickles, so either Italy or Troy. Denyen, many people have suggested these are Homer's Danaans, so the Mycenaeans from Greece. The Weshesh, not sure. Ancient name for Troy is Wilusa, so maybe that's where they're from. The only one that we're pretty sure we know, and it was actually identified already by Champollion, the guy that deciphered hieroglyphics, is the Peleset. Anybody care to take a guess who the Peleset might be? Philistines. The Philistines. And in fact, the Bible says the Philistines came from Crete. So that would actually fit. So,
Here's the problem. What about Central Africa? Why is that dismissed? That's my question.
we may be able to identify where these people come from, but it's not for sure by a long shot. And in fact, the original people talking about this weren't sure if they, as I said, came from there or if they went there. All right, and that.
Let me just explain something. I read somewhere, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but in the Ethiopians, in the highlands of Ethiopia, said that there was sophisticated peoples that showed up at their shores, coming out of the mud, sophisticated in every way. Now, if somebody can verify that, that's fine. I read that somewhere. Now, which means that the bowl of the Libyan Sea drained out, and then they had no place to go. They had no place to go. So they just decided, well, we'll just take all those people's stuff.
That has not been decided either. What has been decided is that they said the Sea Peoples were responsible for the collapse.
There they
1207,
go.
1177, that was the answer.
They didn't just show up from one of these places and nobody ever knew they were there, and then they just all of a sudden decided to overwhelm everybody. No, they came out of the sea because the sea drained.
Gaston Maspero, a French Egyptologist, had already put this theory, it was a theory, actually it was a hypothesis, in about 1850. By 1901, it was solidified. And so every time an archaeologist excavated a site that was destroyed, they said, see, it's the Sea Peoples. The problem is, of course, that's backwards. That's not what you do. So I actually think that this is not the right answer, even though there are some interesting parts to it. So for instance, here's your Sea Peoples again, the Philistines, and we do have Philistine remains in the region that is now Israel, also Lebanon, also Syria. This is degenerate Mycenaean pottery. It looks like somebody from Greece came over, made it, but the clay that they're using is from Cyprus or Rhodes or the Levant. So it really does look like you've got Mycenaeans that join in and come on over. So there is something to the suggestion that the Sea Peoples were real. The Egyptians are not just making them up. But if we take a look at the inscription that he actually leaves us, what Ramses shows us, and it's kind of hard to see, but on the left you've got the actual drawing. On the top right is an artist's rendition of it, and then down bottom a modern day parallel. What Ramses shows us is that these people that are coming, they're not like Vikings. They're not just raiding. They're bringing their families. You've got the wife, you've got the kids, you've got the belongings, you've got the ox cart. These are people moving. They're migrating. So instead of Vikings, think of the Dust Bowl from the 1930s here
Think of the draining of the Libyan Ocean, and they had to get out of there and go somewhere.
in America. Everybody moving from Oklahoma to California. It's that kind of thing. So the question then becomes, what could have started such a migration? Now, I also think that it's a little too simplistic to give the explanation that I was taught in graduate school. They said, oh, there was a drought, and that led to famine, and that led to the movement of the Sea Peoples. That led to cutting of the trade routes, and that then led to collapse because they were not self-sufficient enough. Now, on the one hand, that's a nice explanation. On the other hand, you'll notice it's quite linear. You will also probably realize it's never that nice, right? It's a lot more messy. And so I think that this is not the right answer. I think it's too simple. The Sea Peoples are part of it, yes, but they're not the sole reason. And in fact, I think they might have been as much the victims as they were the oppressors. That is, they are one of the symptoms of this, but I don't think they're the cause.
Now, I don't know if it's significant or not, but I think it is. He's only talking about up in here and down and around on this edge, down on the other side of the Red Sea and the Nile and so forth. I haven't heard any explanation whatsoever of what's going on here in the center of Africa. Now, these people just showed up here. They said they were the Sea People. And then they decide, well, they must have just been living here and nobody knew they were here. That's just not credible. They came from this disaster, which apparently this dragon and this fish and Atlantis, if Plato's correct, he said, I believe he said it was 9,100 years before him. Something like that. Let's go back and look to see what Plato actually said about this event, because he describes this exactly. And it appears to me it all happened at the same time, which caused the migration of all these peoples and all of the subsequent events that we know about, because at this time he said there was a couple, I don't know what he said, 150-year dark ages or whatever, there was nothing happening. Well, I could see that. You know, it's got to dry out, it's got to reform, it's got to have some kind of whatever happens, and it didn't come out too well. It looks like it ended up being desert because it had, you know, it's probably salty-ish and it's got very little there's going to be bloody spots in there because everything out there is made out of biology. I don't care what anybody says anymore. I have the evidence to support what I'm saying. Things will live there in these little oases and stuff like that because those are the little blood vessels and things of giant creatures. Just like you're going to have them all over the place on these giant creatures. There's other ones over here too. If you started digging around enough, you're going to find all kinds of things that were biological. I'm sorry, it's time to take this in reality. And just to be able to put a block over here and pretend that nothing ever happened over here, it just dismisses the reality of the situation. And that's what I see. I see this little block covers up everything that's over where all of these events caused the migration. And nobody has any answers for it. They said it happened in one day. If they paid attention to the text, we'd be really in good shape.
They said that this is the late Bronze Age, and actually the Bronze Age goes from 3000 to 1000 BC, give or take.
All right, so 3000 to 1000, they're doing a lot of work with bronze and metals and so forth. They're starting to get understanding of it. So 3000 BC, if what he's saying happened 1177 BC, right, in that area was this total collapse, we've got civilizations growing up, and they were all over the place. Atlantis was thriving. All of these guys were doing okay, probably at that time. And then when this disaster happened between the dragon and the fish, and Atlantis collapsing, that's when the Dark Ages happened, as far as I can think. Now, let's see what Plato says, because I think it puts it somewhere in this area, 1150 BC, somewhere around. I can't remember what I figured out, but let's go look. Okay, my friends, I'm sorry I went a little long on this. We talked about Atlantis and being right under the fish and the dragon and the fish on top, and it drained out. And I believe this had to happen all at the same time. I can't see any other possibility, but I could be wrong. But I could see that it swished around this fish and over the top of them, and it ran out, all headed the same direction, no puddling or anything, just zipped right out. Now, so I'm going with this happened at the same time. Now, this is when the sea people came over into the Red Sea and invaded this whole area. They had to come out of the ocean here because they had no place to go. And he doesn't talk about this at all that I can find. So let's have a discussion about this, because that would mean that this event, which was talked about, having the dragon sliced, it wasn't that long ago. It had to happen at the same time as this reset of 1177. Let's I can go with that. That's all right. 1186, however, whatever date they want to put. But it's very, very recent when you take the geological scale of things. These are on the surface. Every single specimen I have is on the surface, not deep. Well, I had a couple of things I have that were underneath, but that's only because they dug a little foundation for my house, but only a couple of feet deep. And we've missed it all because they didn't take into the account how mud fossils work. So until somebody starts to discuss it with me, as far as I'm concerned, there's very little credibility in archaeology, geology, anthropology, history, any of it. Chemistry even, because they don't understand atomic electron flood theory, which replaces the Bohr model with nothing but dipoles. And I've shown that in copious number of times. And nobody's denied it's true. They just refuse to engage. It's just like all this. 10 years I've been doing this. DNA, CAT scans, all of it. So I'm just going to go with it day after day. I love you all. Thank you. Have a sterling day. It's going to just keep coming and coming and coming. And I'm hoping that Dr. Klein, I think it was Klein, will engage. I'd certainly like to do that. All right? Thank you. God bless you. I love you.